Hey, welcome back and thanks for tuning in. I'm Ian and this is Opinion. And could I get some fanfare or something? Thank you. I also want to welcome you to this new series I'm adding to my channel, all about the jobs I had while I worked for the Walt Disney Company. This is the first of the series entitled, I Was a Disney Artist. That's right, and in this video I'm going to share with you a bit about my early drawing days, how I got the job, what I did there, and what it was like. Before we get started, I want to invite you to like this video and subscribe to my channel. You can do that right there on the icon or down below. I also want to extend a huge welcome to all my recent new subscribers. I am really glad to have you here, and be sure to stay tuned at the end of the video for a little surprise. Grab your pencil and your paintbrush, and let's go back to where it all started. As a young fella, I drew as often and as much as I could, and I got really good at freehanding characters from my favorite cartoons, pictures out of my favorite illustrated stories, and learning step-by-step character drawing from books like this one, which I checked out of my elementary school library as often as I could. And can we talk about my obsession with the animated version of The Hobbit? If it was creatures, cartoons, or fantastical worlds, I wanted to draw it. And my love for animation art was signed, sealed, and delivered in 1989 when The Little Mermaid was released in theaters. I was hooked, pun intended. Not long after that, in 1991, my first brush with Disney art came when I found out that Disney animator Glenn Keane attended the same high school as me some 15 years earlier. You know, Glenn Keane, the principal animator for Ariel, and later on the supervising animator for characters like the Beast, Aladdin, and Pocahontas. Yeah, that Glenn Keane. I also learned that Glenn's father was Bill Keane, the creator of the Family Circus cartoon strip, which still runs today. And on top of that, I also learned he lived in the same city as me at that time. So I got out my pen and paper and I wrote Mr. Keane, asking him if he could tell me anything about Glenn's artistic path and if there was a way to contact his son. Within 2 weeks, he wrote me back, telling me about where Glenn studied in California and how I could reach him, along with some really inspiring words of encouragement. With this newfound spark of inspiration, I immediately wrote Glenn at the Disney Studios, and like father like son, he wrote me back, telling me about where I could study in California and what steps to take as I went forward as a young artist, along with a signed picture of the Beast. Now that's a cool guy. After graduating high school in 1991 and promptly moving to Orange County, California, my next big brush, pun intended, with Disney art would come 4 years later when I was working full-time as a character performer at Disneyland Park. That's a whole other video. If you went to the park at any point in the mid-1990s and explored Main Street at all, at some point you might have wandered into a shop called New Century Timepieces, where from 1994 to 2007, they had a program where on-site artists created hand-drawn, hand-painted pieces for art watches. So how in the name of churro-scented air did I end up becoming one of those artists? Well, let me tell you. In 1995, like I said, I was a full-time character performer, and I happened to be working the second ever Disneyana convention, which was being held at the Disneyland Hotel. I was friends with Launchpad McQuack that day, who you might remember from DuckTales, and me and a few of my fellow performers were stationed as atmosphere characters in an area of the hotel that had been sectioned off to become sort of a yard sale where they were selling props from parades and signs from events that had come and gone. They also had a panel of consumer product artists who were there to talk with guests about their art jobs and give demonstrations of their drawings. As it turned out, there wasn't much guest traffic in that particular part of the convention that day, and Launchpad was a little bored. So I wandered over in costume to the artist panel and asked I asked one of the artists if she knew how to draw me. She very kindly said, "Oh, Launchpad, I'm so sorry, I don't know how to draw you. The products I design concentrate on the Fab Five," which, in case you don't know, are Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy, and Pluto. But I'm gonna go on my break soon, and I noticed that there's not much for you to do, so I'm gonna leave some paper and a pencil here, and maybe you can draw a little bit to pass the time until your break. So the truth was that I actually did know how to draw Launchpad, but I mean, come on, I was just some guy in a costume. Would you want a picture from me at that time or one from an actual Disney artist? I think I'm gonna have to go with door 2. So I drew her a picture of Launchpad and just kind of left it there on her desk for her to discover when she came back from her break, and then I kind of snuck off to one of the corners. So when she came back, she was about to take her seat when she noticed the drawing on her desk and her head kind of snapped up in a startled way, and she called out to the entire room, "Who drew this?" Well, there I was, who had kind of slinked off into the corner to see how or if she would even react. And I raised my big padded arm silently. She said, "Launchpad, come here." So I, as a big hulking duck, make my way over to her table. "You drew this." I nodded my head yes. "You drew this in those gloves." "I'm sorry. In those hands." I nodded my head yes again. Then she said, "Launchpad, I think there's somebody you need to meet." She walks me over to this curtained cubicle, the kind you find at any convention, disappears behind one of the curtains for a second, and returns with a little old smiley man who looked to be about in his 60s. And she said, "Ralph, I think you need to give Launchpad a job drawing watches on Main Street." Well, it turns out that Ralph was in charge of hiring all the new artists for the New Century Timepiece watch program. After my shift, I got back in my civilian clothes and had a chance to talk to Ralph as me. He was very kind and gave me his card and said that I should submit a portfolio soon. He was based in Florida at the time, so it took about 3 weeks of phone calls and communications and submitting my portfolio and getting all my ducks in a row. See what I did there? But when all was said and done, I got the job and was soon after headed to Main Street, USA as the newest watch artist at New Century Timepieces. So what was this watch artist program all about and how did it work? Well, let me give you the rundown. Each artist had a portfolio filled with character designs that they had drawn, which was on display while they were working. A guest could pick a design from the portfolio and get it in two styles, either monochromatic or full color. If they wanted another design from an artist who didn't happen to be there at that moment, they would just fill out an order which would be completed when that artist worked again. The artist would complete guest orders on site. After that, the original art went to a computer program where the design was reduced to the size of a watch face. That design would get attached to a disc which went inside a hand-assembled watch. Itty bitty bitty bitty. Guests had customization choices for the watches. They could get brown or black bands, gold or silver casing. They could also get the design itself personalized if there was a special event or someone's name that they wanted. I did lots of Policeman Mickey and Fireman Goofies. When the entire process was finished, the guests would receive the original art in a fancy binder, as well as the watch with the reduced image of the art. In addition to the original art watches that guests could order, New Century Timepieces also produced a large number of limited edition watch pieces. Some of the limited edition pieces I worked on while I was there include the Song of the South 50th Anniversary watch, the Haunted Mansion 30th Anniversary watch, which someone liked so much they had tattooed on their back, and this unproduced design which was meant to celebrate the millennium and the opening of Disney California Adventure. One of the most interesting and unique components of this job was that we were right there out in the open, so guests could pass by us all day, and we got a lot of questions.
"Are you tracing?"
Nope. What most guests probably saw was artists doing cleanup drawings, which meant that you would take your rough sketch, put a piece of paper under that on an illuminated table, and then do a final line drawing in preparation for painting the piece. So in all fairness, it is understandable why a guest at first glance would think that that would be tracing. I'm happy to say we were given a lot of flexibility and freedom with our original designs. Did you go to the Disney University? Well, I was never quite sure where that is, and I assume most guests were referring to CalArts in Valencia, California. But as for me, nope, never had an art degree, completely self-taught. Although I did take some community college courses to sharpen my skills, which proved very helpful.
Can you draw, like, every character?
Well, not every single character. As a matter of fact, the range of characters we could draw during that time was a bit limited because licensing for characters from, say, Nightmare Before Christmas or Toy Story still belonged to those individual companies. But that still left plenty of the classic characters, and all of the artists were always adding new designs to their portfolios.
Is that an animatronic?
Nope. 100% real, although sometimes I did do robotic movements just to freak people out. For some reason, I was one of only a couple artists that guests came to when they wanted really obscure characters. So I ended up doing everything from Willie the Operatic Whale to Evinrude from The Rescuers. I spent a very happy 5 years as one of the watch artists on Main Street, and although I left in 2000, the company kept me on as a freelance sketch artist, sending me to events and museums and art openings all around the country to sketch Disney characters for people. The program itself ended in 2007, and it really was a predecessor that paved the way for other sketch artists and animation art to pop up all around the theme parks. You might have visited some of these places recently. Upon visiting the park 2 years ago, I stumbled into the Disney Gallery just off of Town Square on Main Street. There on the wall, 17 years later, was one of my original art pieces from the year 1999. I found out from one of the artists there that when the Watch Artist program closed, they actually let each of the artists keep 12 of their original pieces. I was bummed out because I was long gone by 2007 and had missed that opportunity. But then to my surprise, the manager of the Disney Gallery showed up. I showed him my piece and he handed it to me off the wall, saying, "Take it, it's for you." And it's been hanging here in plain sight the entire time. This is an original piece I painted for the release of Fantasia 2000, featuring the characters from the Rhapsody in Blue sequence. I was floored that they handed it to me right off the wall, already matted and framed. And I never expected all these years later to have my experiences with the art program come full circle. So needless to say, that manager made my day, and week, and month, and probably decade. When I was researching and compiling information for this video, I came across a blog that was created by one of the previous artists, giving readers details about the program like I'm giving you here. I glanced down at the comments and I noticed there was someone who wrote that they had been trying to contact me for almost 20 years to thank me for a picture I had drawn for them when they were 7. Long story short, we connected after all these years, and as it turns out, she grew up to be an artist. Her name is Melissa Sasso, and these are just a couple examples of her fantastic work. I'm going to put a link to more of her work down below. It was a humbling experience to connect with Melissa, and was a really great opportunity to recollect on my experiences as a Disney artist and now share them with you. So that's my Disney story, and there are more on the way. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you really soon.